Israel seems to have upped and escalated to some extent its response to the Hezbollah attacks. Hezbollah has been attacking Israel continuously since pretty much October 7th, October 8th. Probably by this point, 5,000 rockets, anti-tank missiles have rained down on Israeli cities up in the north, which are almost all evacuated. About 100,000 Israelis are not there. And we saw, for example, on Wednesday, Israel struck in a big airstrike about 40 to 50 different targets in southern Lebanon. It was one of the, I would say, more aggressive single attacks in one swoop by the Israeli Air Force. So that also leads to some predictions that things are escalating. The defense minister was also up in the north the other day and again spoke tough. But I have to say is that Israel has been very clear since the beginning. There were some people who were pushing for a more aggressive response to Hezbollah and even an all-out war. But the decision that was made by the cabinet and the Israeli military has stood by is we want to keep this contained. We are focused as a nation right now on Gaza. Let's finish the war with Hamas. And then if there's a need, Israel can move to the north. But the expectation is that once the war in Gaza is over, Hezbollah will also stop shooting, and then pretty much, hopefully, they will be able to find a way for the people to come back to their homes in the north. Hersh Goldberg-Polin was taken like all the other hostages and the 133 who remain in Gaza on October 7th, and there was that really horrific video where he was captured by Hamas and taken hostage from one of these roadside bomb shelters in southern Israel. He had been to the Nova Music Festival, and you saw him as he was being loaded onto the back of a pickup truck holding his left arm, which had been severely wounded during a Hamas grenade explosion inside that bomb shelter. So to see him in this video clearly without his arm is heartbreaking. To look at him and see the life being drained from his face and just how terrible it must be is also heartbreaking. But I can think of the fact that to see this proof of life and to know that it was taken sometime in the last few days does give hope that there are hostages who are still alive. In his particular case, it shows that he received medical care and was treated for his wound, and he has survived. So it is incumbent on Israel to really do what it can to get these people home. They need to be brought home. And I think that, yes, on the one hand, Hamas is trying to manipulate and rip out our hearts and get us to pressure the government. As we saw after the video came out, people rushed out to the streets to protest outside the prime minister's residence and also in Jerusalem and also in Tel Aviv. But this is something that we have to remember. There's 133 people who are still being held in some dark hole in Gaza. And it is this government's responsibility to bring them home. A video of this kind, on the one hand, is highly emotional. It's charged. It pierces every Israeli's heart. Whether you are the prime minister, a general in the IDF, and a soldier on the battlefields of Gaza, or an Israeli who's sitting at home. This is something that every Israeli is watching and seeing and crying together with the Goldberg-Polin family. And I can only imagine what his parents, John and Rachel, and two sisters, are also going through. But the Israeli decision makers have to compartmentalize to some extent, right? They have to, and I hope that this is what they're doing, they have to be able to look at the situation and ask themselves, is there a deal on the table? Can we safely retrieve and get back the hostages, even at the price of a ceasefire now that would leave Hamas standing in Gaza? Or do we finally need to go into the southern city of Rafah to prosecute that operation there, where we are told 15,000 Hamas armed men are still holed up, where Hamas has a series of tunnels along the border with Egypt, which it uses to smuggle in sophisticated Iranian weaponry? Does Israel need to do that? And maybe that going into Rafah will put the pressure needed on Hamas to finally agree to a deal. So these are very complicated decisions, but it's hard to disconnect the emotion, although I think that that's what the government needs to do. It needs to make the decision that's right for the security of the state of Israel. I don't give any credence to the Hamas claims that they're willing to disarm and suddenly they're willing to embrace a two-state solution. If there's been one of the greatest enemies and disruptors of a two-state solution, it is Hamas. Since the 1990s, after the Oslo Accords were signed, Hamas began its suicide bombing campaign, blowing up buses here in Jerusalem and all across the country. They've killed and massacred probably at this point 2,000 plus Israelis over the years, just much more, but just 1,200, 1,300 on that first day of October 7th, but over 1,000 in the years preceding in different terrorist attacks. These are people who do not want to disarm, do not want there to be peace between Israel and the Palestinian people, because then it would remove any justification or legitimacy for them to continue to exist. They thrive on the continuation of this conflict. So anything that they say right now in that spirit, I would say back, no problem. Disarm and there will be peace. Sometimes things are that simple. Sometimes all that's needed is for Hamas or any of Israel's enemies, it could be Hezbollah also in the north, stop attacking Israel, and you'll see there will be no need for a war. Return our people, there will be no need for a war. So they could say they want to disarm, but then continue to attack Israel. That kind of does undermine the validity of what they're trying to say they want to do. Israel has to remain focused on what its challenges are right now. And these are the military security challenges it faces in Gaza in particular. We have to end this war. It's gone on already for too long. It's time to get these hostages home and to finish off to the greatest extent possible, at least at this high intensity stage, those Hamas battalions that remain standing there, and try and hopefully find some sort of solution for northern Israel, because the current reality is not sustainable. That Hezbollah feels that with impunity it can continue to rain down rockets on Israeli towns and communities there. This also has to change. So hopefully Israel will succeed. Hopefully Israel will be able to get to Yahya Sinwar, who's the mastermind of the October 7th attacks, and also Mohammed Def, who's another one of the military commanders and has long been someone who Israel has hunted down over the years. It's not the end all or the solution to this conflict, right? I believe that Israel will get to him. It might take time. Remember, Osama bin Laden took a number of years until the United States was able to get their hands on the perpetrator and mastermind of the 9/11 attacks in the United States. So these things do take time, but you can continue to eviscerate, weaken, and demolish Hamas military capabilities. And basically what Israel's goal is to transition and turn Hamas from a military terrorist group to a terrorist insurgency. In other words, it's not going to be as organized as it is right now, but there will still be Hamas guys. Israel's not going to be able to take out each and every one of them. But then it can move from the high intensity stage to a lower intensity stage, carry out more pinpointed counter-terrorist operations, and hopefully along the way, when Sinwar decides to pop out of a tunnel, or Israel gets intelligence of exactly where he is, they'll be able to go in and get him. But that might take time.